We've hit the big episode number 50, but the Major League Rugby grind don't stop. This week, we continue getting you prepared for MLR 2023 with a breakdown of the best forwards heading into this season. The Fantasy Ruckers Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode number 50 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of trying to make fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. And let me tell you, we're a little bit more excited on this week's episode because we've hit number 50, Matt Yee, Ryan Yee here with you as always. And who would have thought, Matt, that this journey would have lasted this long? And hopefully it's a journey that's going to continue on as we continue trying to make fantasy rugby a thing in Major League Rugby.
Hey, look, all I can say is, we did it, man. We did it. The Fantasy Ruckers, us as a whole, the group, the team, the squad, we did it. We made it to 50, halfway to 100, but I'm too busy celebrating today to get to think about 100 right now. And look, Ryan, we got to call it out. I think once we saw the traction that was building off of our first few episodes, the league members that were interested in joining our initiative, I think we knew we were going to get here from the start, Ryan.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Maybe it deserves a little round of applause, I think, for us to get that. Yeah, I mean, looking back at this, man, to hit episode number 50, absolutely incredible. When you and I and Vandy, who had just started this, when we were in early discussions working through this, I mean, we couldn't have imagined to have been able to hit 50 episodes. Really, for us, it was just taking it week by week, trying to figure out what the next steps were for Major League Rugby. But now that we're finally here, hit number 50, super exciting stuff. But like you mentioned, man, we're still on this grind. We mentioned up at the teaser as well. It's all about moving forward here and continuing to try to make fantasy rugby a thing, a staple thing, I should say, in the MLR. And we're super excited for everyone out there to continue that journey with us. We want to thank our viewers and listeners for sticking with us for 50 episodes. I think over the course of the Fantasy Ruckers Show, the young stages of the Fantasy Ruckers Show, I think there's been a whole bunch of growth with this show, and I think it's been fantastic, the support that we've been getting throughout this time, and we hope that support continues to grow moving forward, as the Fantasy Ruckers Show has no plans of going anywhere, as we're determined here to make fantasy rugby a real thing.
Yeah, and you know what? We got fans from far and wide, and even you Dallas Jackals fans, you know, we're talking to you too. We're saying thanks to you too. You know, we're just happy to be here. We couldn't have done it without you. And hey, time to just keep on getting better, Rye. Keep on getting better. Like I've said the past few episodes, 1% every episode, 1% every year. I'm going to keep getting better as a Fantasy Rucker League member. I'm going to keep getting better as a Fantasy Rucker host. And we're going to keep getting better as a team, as a Fantasy Rucker, the show.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. And over that time, this jersey behind me, this Fantasy Ruckers Championship jersey. If you're listening on the podcast, it's always behind me here. And the names on this jersey are just going to grow over the years after finishing our first season last year. We're continuing to hope to continue seasons for many more years to come. So super exciting stuff. Here's to another 50 episodes. But like we mentioned, Matt, the grind doesn't stop. We're continuing to work here, and that's exactly what we're doing on this episode. We're continuing to get people prepared for the upcoming 2023 MLR season. We've been breaking it down all off season long, talking about new roster moves. But man, we are literally weeks away, and I cannot wait for this season. Just feels like there's a little bit more anticipation heading into this year, and we couldn't be more excited to get things kickstarted and tackle the 2023 Fantasy MLR season. So gonna be super fun stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm ready. I'm counting down the days to the draft. But hey, we got to get some things out of the way today first before we can get to all the fun research stuff. All the, everybody's on the edge of their seat seeing what players I pulled out of the hat to put in my top fives. we got to take care of some stuff, right?
We do got to take care of some stuff. First, I guess the things to take care of is, hey, if you aren't already, make sure you're following us at the Fantasy Ruckers, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, also our YouTube channel here. Throw us a like, give us a subscription there if you really like our content. It goes a long way for us, and helping us out. And that's also all the places where you're going to find out first. We're continuing to work hard here to make fantasy rugby a thing that everyone that is a MLR fan, an opportunity to try this out and really get involved with fantasy MLR. We're continuing to work that. We got a team working on all that, and all those social media channels is where you're going to find out when it is finally a thing that is able to expand to much more people, and where you can join a league of your own if you are listening. So yeah, new viewers, old viewers, we're super excited for you guys to come on here.
Don't forget about the Discord, Ryan.
That's right.
That Discord, I keep saying it every episode. It's about to be bumping. I'm about to get my fingers typing. The season's coming around. Once we start getting closer to this draft, once more news starts rolling out, the games start going, you're about to see that chat go crazy. And, I'm going to shout out to our most recent joiner. If you're watching James Canada, I'm going to call you out because you're the most recent guy joining the Discord. Follow his lead, everybody. What's it to you?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the Discord community is continuing to grow. Our supportership is continuing to grow, and we're super excited to continue bring all the great fantasy MLR content moving forward. But you also mentioned there is a little bit of housekeeping to take care of. You may notice that the big man, Vandy, is not here. Devin Vandy Vanderbilt, the Rucking Goat. He's not on this episode, and unfortunately, we do have an announcement that we want to tell our viewers that due to life and due to things that come up, it's super exciting stuff for him on a day-to-day day basis. The guy has earned himself working hard a brand new promotion heading into this year, and the job that he does from a day-to-day basis to pay the bills and support his family. And with that, though, it requires a little bit extra time involved outside of the normal working hours. So it's going to be a little bit tougher for him to hop on the show on a regular basis. But that is the key, though, Matt. It is just not on a regular basis, but he's still going to do what he can to appear on the show when he can. When we have interview guests, he's going to try to hop on, because we know that he is a fan favorite out there. We know that he brings a nice perspective. Matt, you and I have had a whole bunch of rugby experience over our years, and it was a breath of fresh air, to bring Vandy in and kind of experience rugby for the first time, almost like vicariously through him. You know what I mean? Like to learn rugby once again for a second time through Vandy was a lot of fun. Again, he's still going to be involved in the league. He's still going to be involved in the Discord. He just might not be here on a weekly basis, but he's going to do his best to at least make an appearance for
Ryan. Vandy's, Vandy knows it. Vandy's our boy. Vandy's once a fantasy rucker, always a fantasy rucker, and he's always one of us. He's always going to be in that intro. We're always going to call him out. I'm always going to keep telling him how much he sucks at fantasy rugby. That's never going to change. Just sometimes he won't be here to take it, and he's going to have to respond the next time he comes on the show.
And admit it, man. You're gonna miss the guy. I'm gonna miss the guy. I think also too
the shine off of his bald head, Ryan, made my face look better. So it was a nice mix of everything. But hey, I'll just have to get a brighter light. That's fine.
And hey, maybe when you throw shots his way and he doesn't have the ability to protect himself on the show.
No, it's gonna be like a bat signal, Ryan. It's gonna be like the Vandy signal.
Exactly.
I'm gonna start throwing shots, and he's gonna feel like he's obligated to come back on here to speak for himself.
That's what I was just gonna say. I was gonna say that by you throwing those shots, it's only gonna want to convince him more to make that to get on the show. I mean, who cares about the day-to-day job, man? A promotion? Psh, what does that do? But no.
Hey, come on. You got to make that money.
Exactly. In all seriousness, no, we're super pumped up for Vandy and the growth that he's experiencing from just a generic life standpoint. Again, we've appreciated the effort and time that he's put into the show since the beginning. And again, this is not the end of him being part of the show. He will always be a part of the Fantasy Ruckers, and he's definitely going to make an appearance when he can. We just wanted to make sure the viewers and listeners knew that now that he may not be here as often as he would like to be, that he still will be around when he can.
Just makes the times a little more special, guys. That's all it
Exactly.
is.
Make sure you appreciate those Vandy times. And for one last sending message, we wanted to make sure that he had a say here when it came to hitting episode 50 and the journey of him being a part of that and everything going on and being able to kind of send a message to you, the viewers, and the listeners with how much you have meant to him. Here's a message from Devin Vandy Vanderpool himself.
Devin Vanderpool here with the Fantasy Ruckers, and I just want to make a quick video here for a shout out to episode 50. I mean, that's an awesome milestone to hit. This project has exceeded all of our expectations, and it's in huge credit to our fans, to our viewers, to the league members, to everybody. Because I mean, this project is nothing without everybody. So, I mean, I have to give a big thank you to them and a big thank you to Ryan and Matt. I mean, they're the structure, they're the bones of this project, and I mean, without them, this league would be nothing. With all the effort they put in between the shows and with the league, it's just incredible. It's been a blast. I'm really looking forward to this year. I'm gonna have to take a step back from the episodes a little bit. Life's gotten in the way. I'm not leaving the show or anything, but I won't be on as frequent. I'll still be in the league, still be in the Discord, talking, keeping up to date, watching the games, and I mean. I'm super excited for this year, super excited to get a championship, and I'm super excited to watch Utah get a championship. But no, I just once again want to say thank you to our fans, to our viewers, Ryan and Matt, these league members. I mean, this is awesome. It's just been incredible. And I mean, this community, I didn't know how they were going to feel about a guy who knew nothing coming in trying to talk like he knows something, but it's been nothing but a good time, and I can't wait to see where we're at next year. So thanks again, guys, and go Utah.
All right, and again, we got to thank Vandy so much for that message, and I know he again, he was a fan favorite, or he is a fan favorite. I've heard the feedback from our viewers and from our listeners who just love hearing Vandy's hot takes, and I think it is refreshing, not only for us, but also for fans out there who already are rugby fans, to see someone who's making the effort to kind of learn a brand new sport through his passion of fantasy rugby. And it's kind of, it's an epitome. It's an epitome of what we are trying to do, right? We are trying to introduce the sport of rugby to new fans, and especially if someone is, interested in fantasy sports, here's a new avenue for you to kind of test out your fantasy skills. And that's something that Vandy has shown and proven is a possible thing to do. And now he's watching rugby on a weekly basis, and he'll continue to do that through this year.
And he's the exact kind of guy, an exact, North American or South America, or wherever you're from. He's the exact fan that you're trying to attract to the MLR, to watch the MLR, so we can make, the MLR a staple in North America. That's exactly what we're looking for. But I got to call out a couple things, Ryan. This guy comes on, sends us a video and puts in there that he's going to become the Fantasy Rucker League champion. The Utah Warriors are going to be champions. Look, I mean, he can have one maybe, but I'm going to say that he's going to get none of them, because that guy's going to be sitting at the bottom of the table just like last year, right? Because he's only got, there's one guy that was below him last year. I'm not going to be there.
First episode,
that ain't me.
First episode out, and the Vandy signal is already out. You're ready.
I got to throw it out there. I already miss him, so I got to throw it out there.
There you go. All right. Well, now that all of that is out of the way, and again, Vandy is going to make his best effort to be a part of this show when he can. And again, congratulations to him and all the exciting stuff that's going on in his life. But it is time to move on here, Matt, and talk a little bit about fantasy rugby and the 2023 MLR season that is quickly approaching. We mentioned it's only weeks away, so we're continuing to get all of our viewers and listeners prepared for this upcoming MLR season. And on this episode, it is all about talking about the top fantasy forwards heading into the 2023 year. So we're going to break it all down. We're going to go through our positions. If you had been following along, for all our viewers and listeners out there, you know that we have broken down the positions from a fantasy standpoint into front row, second row, back row, and then of course we are going to have an overall forward ranking, top 5, that we will unveil as well. So we're going to get to that in just a moment here, but before we get to those rankings, there is some news to catch up on, some pretty spicy news, I should say. The MLR community of one specific team in general is
Oh
a
my
little bit up in
goodness.
arms, and they're not quite too happy right now. So let's hop right into the news and notes. We're going to break down some of the latest goings around the league, and also some of the latest roster moves that are going to have an impact here into the 2023 fantasy season. But we got to talk about it first, what we just mentioned. Rugby Atlanta coming out with an unexpected rebranding, and it's not getting the I guess feedback from the Rugby Atlanta faithful that the ownership group was necessarily expecting or wanting to hear.
Ryan, they had it, man. You talked about this. You vouched for them. You had their back. Ryan, you had their back.
That's true.
You
I did
kept
have their
going,
back.
The rattle's great. The rattlesnakes, it's a great little, way that they built that into the ATL, the rugby ATL, the way that worked out. And now it's just, I don't even know what to say.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
my first thought was, okay, so they're rebranding to get away from, maybe looking like Utah Warriors, the black and red. Okay, I understand.
There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that, and there's San Diego's like that.
Yeah, San Diego's like, exactly. So I was like, okay, get away. But then they changed to a green to match the Chicago Hounds. Like what is? I don't even understand. And then you throw in the icing on the cake, Rye, of we are Tri-City. We are
not the best.
I would get it if maybe it was a tri-state area team. I don't know if even that's a nickname for Atlanta. I don't even. It is awful, and it was so awful.
Kind of cheesy, I think.
It was definitely cheesy. It's like Gouda cheese. Well, no, Bata cheesy. You know what I mean? Like, it's like it is so awful that they needed to release a statement to the fans apologizing for what they put out. Apologizing. And they put out this long letter. They say, I'm going to put a live stream out, and then Ryan, right? And just it looks like they're just tumbling, and you just hope that that's not going to be the way that their season is this year.
And I was scrolling through the MLR Reddit community, and people had been taking screenshots
Oh my gosh.
of
The
just
look
how
on their faces.
I know they just absolutely look miserable, because obviously that's not the reception that you want to get from the core fan base. But going back and just touching on, I've been a proponent of how cool.
Yes.
I thought that Rugby Atlanta, the abbreviations RATL, rattle, just fit so perfectly in their name, and them kind of embracing the whole rattlesnake concept. And you mentioned cherries on top. I think the ultimate icing on the cake was the fact that in that letter that you mentioned, that is posted on their social media channels, is they referred to the fans, dear rattlers. It's like, come on,
It's
dude.
like you're mentioning exactly what you just took away from everybody. Apparently they're taking down the mural. I think they had a mural of a snake too, and they're taking that down on the field. I don't know, Ryan. Yeah. It's just, look, they took an L before the season started, right?
Yeah, it's tough. And I mean, I will say it's not terrible. Okay, I have seen the releases of their jerseys. The jerseys aren't bad either, but I just think that they had it so good at the start. There was no need to change anything, and I'm curious. I don't know if they'll ever come out, but I'm curious on why they felt like they really needed to make this move.
I don't mind to your point, right? I don't mind the rebrand. Like, rebrand, sure. Like, I think you had something good, rebrand, sure, but like, I thought if you're going to rebrand, come out with something unique, come out with something, thoughtful. It just seems like you put that together last week. Like, I don't know. I just hope that's not a foreshadowing of how their season's going to go, because, that's a good squad. We know how good that team is, but I don't know how Tri-City they are.
Well, I mean, I guess that is one thing. No matter, I mean, there is the old saying of, look good, feel good, play good. They might be feeling and looking a little worse in this year, but again, you mentioned that Rugby Atlanta is a solid team, and I don't think that this will have any leakage into their play into the 2023 year. But who's to say that? But yeah, that's something we wanted to get out of the way. It was making waves across social media and the MLR community, so we wanted to make sure we touch on it. Again, not so much related or having an impact on fantasy rugby itself, but hey.
Hey, if it impacts the Rugby Atlanta team, well, I don't even know what to call them anymore. I was going to call them Rattle, but who knows? The Rugby Atlanta team, then it impacts fantasy.
Yeah, no kidding.
Hope
so,
not,
we'll see. But yeah, not the biggest fans, and again, more so because we thought what they already had was so good. And you've mentioned it on the show before, Matt. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that was something that wasn't broke, and they didn't need to fix it. So, but moving on here to some more kind of fantasy related content here that may have an impact moving forward into this 2023 year. Roster moves are still happening, man. We are getting to the preseason part of the MLR. A bunch of teams are having some of those matches going on either quite soon with these teams. It'll be interesting to see how we can kind of see that and see how these teams are actually coming together as a unit. But there are still guys that are coming into the league or making some re-signings. One that we can mention, I think, that is the biggest out of all the signings so far is the return of Will Hooley to the San Diego Legion. Again, he was a big part of the San Diego last year before getting injured. The guy playing at that fly half position, and he was a key cog of that. Allowed kind of Joe Peterson to move over more regularly to that fullback position. But I think the return of Will Hooley's huge.
Yeah, and we don't know what's happening with Joe Peterson. I haven't seen anything that has confirmed that he's returning. So, with the MLR, unless they've confirmed it, I'm going to assume that they're not there because you never know. But they did bring on Luke Burden, right? So they've got Will Hooley. Luke Burden can also play 15. I think that's a great re-signing for them. Hooley, every time he stepped in that 10 position, he looked electric.
And this was a guy under our new fantasy stats, scored 93.8 total fantasy points, finishing around the 120th mark in our fantasy ranking. So a guy that is definitely fantasy relevant.
And he didn't even play every game last year.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So he's definitely due for a big season. Definitely when we get there, Ryan, we can't get there too soon. When we get there, I'm sure he'll be in the conversation.
Absolutely. And then some other re-signings kind of around the league. Aaron Gray returning to the Dallas Jackals. This is a big one that I mentioned because I feel like there's still a whole lot of lack of clarity when it comes to what the heck the Dallas Jackals are putting out this upcoming season.
Just FYI, we're going through all the rosters trying to figure out exactly who's on what team. And I mean, there is one glaring hole, and it's called the Dallas Jackals.
Yeah.
I don't even.
We've been able to build a lot of the rosters, kind of just making assumptions and making predictions with a lot of the teams in order for us to kind of come up with these top 5 rankings and things like that. But yeah, you mentioned the Dallas Jackals are kind of that one glaring hole that we still have no idea what's going on. So a little bit of clarity there, but as one comes in, another leaves. Augusta Bohm is leaving the Dallas Jackals. So that's one that we don't know about.
Hole that's being left there now, guys. It's the same hole.
Now, different positions. Obviously, Aaron Gray is a back 3 player, Augusta Bohm a front rower, but nonetheless, that roster size of that team, at least on our roster sheet that we have running, does not change in size at all. We still have no idea in that space. Ignacio Doughty, second rower for the NOLA Gold. He's actually moving to the Super Rugby Americas and playing for, pronouncing it correct, Peñarol, I believe.
Sure.
Again, I think the interesting point here is that another player is moving.
Hey, we talked about this last week, right?
We did, and there was a lot of players last week that we mentioned that moving over to the Glendale Raptors, who are this year competing in the Super Rugby Americas. So this episode, Ignacio Doughty, just an example of how there is somewhat of a shift. I wouldn't say concerning in any shape or form because we just have such an influx of players coming into the MLR, especially this offseason. But at the very least, there is something to keep in mind that there are players and there is a competition for rugby in the kind of Americas region with the growth of Super Rugby Americas, and players are considering moving to some of those teams down there. And then I think overall, at least from a big standpoint, Michael Baska, he's moving over to the Chicago Hounds, which is another one that's pretty big. But again, I think a lot of these teams are finalizing their rosters here, and we'd like to see a few more Dallas Jackals signings coming out in the near future.
Please.
But nonetheless, though, I think the storyline of the week is Will Hooley returning, and then maybe a couple guys still going.
Well, I think right. Another big one that you didn't quite mention is Gaston Mira is leaving the Arrows as well.
Yes, I did want to mention that too.
I think that's a pretty big one, but he was big for their team last year. He was a really strong back 3 player. Maybe not as fantasy relevant, but I think he was a strong player for that side. But less of a loss when you bring on guys like Fabian Goodall, the rugby league guy that they brought in, right? You bring on some back row, some homegrown players, Cole Davis, Avery Oideman, all these guys. I think they filled the holes nicely to fill that gap.
And I think what that is more of a reflection of, I think you nailed it on the head there, is that we know what Gaston Mieres was able to do last season. I mean, we're looking at his stats here: 111.8 total fantasy points with the new stats baked in. That was a top 90 finish, so a guy that was definitely fantasy relevant. And I think especially when it comes to the back three position, obviously we have some of the guys that are really key and we know are going to perform, but there are also teams where if you can slot a guy in there, especially a guy with the talent of some of the guys that you mentioned, they will do just fine in replicating, if not doing better from a fantasy production standpoint. So again, Gaston Mieres, he will be missed by the Toronto Arrows, but you mentioned those rosters signings that they are bringing in. I think that there will be some fantasy points to be found when it comes to those newcomers, which will be interesting how people approach that when it comes to the upcoming fantasy MLR draft for our Fantasy Ruckers League that we'll talk more about later in the show. Some things that also we wanted to quickly touch on before we move here to the top 5 fantasy forwards of 2023 that you all are waiting for. We want to mention some more jersey reveals because these are always fun. I always love the kit. We talked about a lot of the jerseys last episode. And episodes before, touching on some of those new releases. A couple more releases coming out recently. Old Glory DC revealing their jersey. I do like the way it looks, kind of classic with what they've been going with, kind of an homage to the Washington DC flag. Some people not a big fan of the 3 stars on the jersey. Some people are. I kind of like the messaging there. Nonetheless, nothing crazy, nothing spectacular, but not bad either. So I think Old Glory DC playing it safe here and putting out some nice kit here for
they played it safe. They kept it classy. Look, what are you gonna do when the flag is as basic as that? It's 3 stars. What they tried their best. They honored their city. They kept it classy. No complaints. No complaints.
All right, and then now moving to one that I know that we want to touch a little bit more on, not necessarily because of the way the jersey looks, but more so how cool it is we've talked about sponsors here before. We talked about, the Kings and Convicts, how we love the look of that on the San Diego Legion jersey. But this one, kind of a different messaging here. The Toronto Arrows releasing their kit, and it looks like I do love the way the kit looks. I love it's a classic Toronto Arrows kit. I like the kind of the undertone kind of stripes that are happening with the blue and the darker blue, and on their white jersey, kind of that off-white. But the big thing here that we want to talk about is the fact that they are highlighting a really, really crucial organization in their own area, and that is TURF, the Toronto Inner City Rugby Foundation. And Matt, I know you're familiar with this foundation, having been involved with rugby in the GTA region. Just talk a little bit how cool it is for them to involve TURF as their main sponsor.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I don't even know if sponsor is the best way to put it. I think it's more of partnership, just because I think it just represents how tied the Arrows are to the grassroots rugby of that region and of that city. TURF is a foundation that has you look on the Canadian national team, you can see guys that have grown through TURF. You look at Josiah Mora, if anybody knows that name, right? He played on the Arrows a little bit as well. He grew right through that pathway of TURF. It just shows how connected they are to the city, the inner city youth there as well. The rugby that is developing at the grassroots level. I think it's a real classy gesture on their part. I love it. I absolutely love it. It has a little bit of an emotional connection for me just with me knowing the foundation. So I love it. I love the connection. I love the partnership. I love the message that it displays out to the rest of the MLR and North America and everybody watching.
Hey, I think I'll leave it right there because I don't think I could say it any better myself. But
hey, can we as we move on, just before we head into the juicy stuff, Rye, I think it was James Steele or it was Derek Brissett, one of the guys on Twitter, one of the the classic MLR pundits. They said that at the Rugby Ironworkers photo day, the New York jersey looks a little different.
Okay.
It's a little different than what the display they told me. They put a collar on, a nice collar on. The collar looks good. And it has a nice little Ironworkers right across the chest. It doesn't look plain anymore.
Okay.
I mean, look, it's still got the bridge design, but I will say that they have adding those have made the jersey a little bit better.
They heard you, and they heard Vandy last episode when he was breaking it down.
Yeah,
and they want to make sure that
they quickly pulled out the iron, Ryan, and they just started putting on Ironworkers on the front. They quickly stitched on a collar. I mean, honestly, it was probably because the picture was of Sam Windsor with a mustache. So I don't know. It's pretty hard for him to look bad in any jersey. So he probably helped it out a little bit.
Fair enough. All right. Well, let's move on to that juicy stuff that we've been alluding to all
Oh,
episode long, and this is something that I know a lot of our viewers and listeners are excited for, looking to really put players on a list here. I know guys love rankings, and especially when it comes to fantasy, any fantasy sport,
mhm.
when the season quickly approaches, you're always looking for who's the guys to look out for, and I mean, me as commissioner, I have no issue of releasing my top five and giving some helpful hints
Why?
to our league members. I know you've mentioned.
I'm for the people, Ryan. I keep mentioning this every show. I'm for the people. Take it or leave it. You want to trust me? You trust me. If you don't trust me, you don't trust me. That is what it is. But just know I'm putting in the work. I'm putting in the sticky notes. These guys are the real deal that I'm about to state.
All right, so we're gonna break it all down. We're gonna tell you and reveal the each of our own top 5 fantasy forwards heading
Yeah.
into the 2023 season.
Hey, Ryan, important to note. I don't know if you're going to say this, but important to note that this is only based on guys that we have confirmed to have signed with a team.
Yes, and that is a good thing to mention here. Again, I think that's a part of the league still trying to find its footing here and its growth in getting these and team-wise too, in getting these rosters out. We greatly appreciate, I should say, the teams that have come out with those official roster lists. We talk about teams like Houston, NOLA, DC, Rugby Atlanta, even Utah. They came out. I don't even count Seattle Seawolves as core pod because that's kind of like a half effort there.
Definitely not Dallas.
Definitely not Dallas. So we are, again, we should definitely clarify that, yes, these are guys that we have confirmed or believe that are going to be there for the 2023 year. Again, most of these guys we've already confirmed anyways. Like the top guys on these lists have already made an announcement, or the team has made an announcement that they're returning, just because they're such vital pieces for those respective teams.
Returning or new?
Returning or that's true too. Yeah, there might be some new faces on this list that some people may have haven't heard about, maybe just have heard in our signing segments. But hey, now we're putting a fantasy framework here on those players and see what impact that they may have and predict the impact that they may have in this 2023 season. Another thing that we want to mention, we're still trying to make sure we're including as much stats as we can, and we went forward here with basing these rankings off of the stats that we were breaking down all off season long. Maybe a little bit teaser of a possibility that we're getting closer and closer to introducing these stats. We told you that we are working hard in finding a way to get that done, and that's why we broke it down all off season long. So we're going to continue our optimism.
We told the people, episode 50, the Fantasy Ruckers, we're still grinding.
We're still grinding, and that work is continuing. So we're hoping that we're able to do that. So with a little bit of optimism involved, we went ahead and built these top 5 rankings based on some of those stats. So hey, enough playing around here, man. It's time to get to business. So let's pop up our first graphic here for our top fantasy front rowers for 2023. And again, we'll remind the people that it's front row, second row, back row, and then the forward flex position. That is the key stuff here in our rosters in the Fantasy Ruckers League. So here you have a look at the top front rowers. You got Ryan's top 5, Matt's top 5, and that's how we're going to do it throughout this segment. And it's basically
take a look at this one.
It's pretty chalk here. We have pretty similar players on this list, maybe in a little bit of different rankings, but you do have a new name on the list as well. For our listeners, I'm going to read out my top 5 for them, and for our viewers, you can see the graphic on our screen. For my top 5, I got Dean Muir, Houston SaberCats, Dylan Fawcett, Rugby New York at the 2nd spot, Hugh Roach of the Chicago Hounds now in that 3rd spot for me, and then James Malcolm as the Seattle Seawolves. He's incoming, or he's playing there again, and then Andrew Quatron of the New England Free Jacks, a new face there, obviously coming from the Toronto Arrows, having a brief stint in Utah, not from a playing perspective, but hey, just took a little
tourist trip,
a little transfer. Got to see Utah and then shipped right over there to the New England Free Jacks. But Matt, your top 5 that you got on this list.
Pretty similar at the top. Dean Muir from the Houston SaberCats. We know Dylan Fawcett. We matched there. I switched it up a little bit from you. James Malcolm at the number 3 spot. Hugh Roach at the number 4 spot. And then coming in at number 5, we got newcomer, the new Utah Warrior, Henry Bell. The man from Otago, I had to throw it in there, but I've got my reasonings.
All right, well, let's break down those reasonings and let's go through 1 through 5 and explain why we have those guys in that spot. So obviously, both of you and I agree. We don't need to spend too much time on this, but Dean Muir, obviously a big one. Probably out of all the top 5s that we had to break down, was probably the easiest decision. He was superior last year. Houston obviously has an emphasis on using that forward pack. He was the unquestionable top number 1 front rower, 141.1 total fantasy points throughout the entire of the 2022 season. So just super incredible stuff, and really easy to put him at that top spot.
Yeah. I mean, I think all I'm going to say is that when I was putting this together, the first thing I said was, well, I can't not put D Muir here. And then that was it. That was my discussion with myself. So that's really all we need to say.
Exactly. And just to break down kind of some of the stats that Dean Muir had last season, this was a guy that racked up a whole bunch of tries as well. He was able to score, I believe, 10 tries on the season. Was able to rack up a whole bunch of tackles as well, racking up a total of, I believe, I'm just pulling it up here, 150 tackles. So among one of the highest of that front row position, which is interesting.
But look at, Ryan, the big stat for me is, we talk about all these matchups that you win by 1 point, 0.5 points, all those matchups that we've seen. Maybe it changed this year, maybe it doesn't. But those 70 plus and 80 plus minutes for me, compared to the rest of the hookers on this list, it was just unmatched.
Sure.
He was playing full games, and that's just more opportunity. We talk about opportunity. More opportunity for him to make tackles, more opportunity for him to get turnover ball, score tries, get some meters gained. It's that's another stat there. Just another reason why D Muir is just an unquestionable number 1 here for both of us.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to number 2, we got Dylan Fawcett on the list. This one finishing last season with 127.1 total fantasy points, finished as the 4th best front rower last year. So a little bit of a bump up here on this list. For me, at least, largely in part due to him being a part of Rugby New York. We're expecting big things from Rugby New York. It's hard to think that because they obviously won the championship last season, but it sounds like this team is only even getting better from what they put out on the field last season. Maybe not so much bringing in new guys, but the fact that they're really seeming to mesh and grow as a unit is only going to do wonders for that forward pack in Rugby New York. Lots of scoring opportunities. That means they're going to find lots of ample opportunities of being within that 5-meter line to get that maul, and who's going to be the biggest benefactor of that happening. It's going to be Dylan Fawcett, who receives that ball on the back end and is able to score easy tries throughout the 2023 season.
Yeah, for me, this was another one that was the minute he re-signed with Rugby New York, once that news came out, I knew exactly where I was going to put him in my rankings. He's the only guy that really matched Dean Muir in tries last year, which is, something that you love to see, regardless of how
both
we scored
10 tries last season.
Yeah, tries is something that we want to see. The other thing that I think and something that you haven't pointed out yet, Rye, is the fact that Caleb Geiger's coming back, and we already know how that combination works, right?
Right.
We know how they split time. There's no question of what that depth chart looks like. We know exactly that Dylan Fawcett is the hooker for them. And you know what? Fawcett can also go back and play number 8. We always forget this, but he comes back, he plays number 8, and that's just something that we can expect to see from him throughout the season, even when Caleb Geiger comes in to play hooker at second half.
And that's really the big difference between, I think, Dean Muir and Dylan Fawcett. Is Dean Muir, you can, like, to your reliability that you're talking about, he stays on the pitch. We know Dylan Fawcett is going to often get subbed out before that 70-minute mark to score those extra bonus points in our scoring. For those of you who are just tagging along and just learning about this league, in our league, you get a bonus for playing 70 minutes plus in a match, and then an even increased bonus of if you play the whole 80 minutes. And again, Dean Muir has more high frequency of that. And then I'm looking here as well in the stats. Dean Muir was able to put that much more points than the next front rower, and he had 22 turnovers last year. So the fact that he had that many turnovers and still was able to score as many points as he had, just think about
another reason why Dean Muir was just unquestionable up there. you know?
Exactly. All right. So now moving on, and this is where it starts to differ a little bit. So at the number 3 position, you have James Malcolm,
Yeah.
130.5 fantasy points last season, finishing as the second best front rower as part of that Seattle pack. And we know how deadly that Seattle pack can be and the emphasis that they have in that game style that the Seawolves play with. I went with Hugh Roach of the Chicago Hounds. Now, let me explain why I went in my direction. Then, Matt, I'll throw it to you to kind of explain why you went with James Malcolm. I was hesitant because there is now an influx of, it seems like, hookers in Seattle, and I'm just not sure if we're going to be able to get that reliability from James that we saw last season. And I think the thing that pushes me over the edge here with Hugh Roach is that I am so excited for the Chicago Hounds offense. It's something that's going to be high powered, again, kind of similar to the Rugby New York idea, just going to be a lot of scoring opportunities. Again, we don't know the emphasis that the Hounds are going to have when it comes to their forward pack. They do have a strong forward pack, but they also have a very strong back line as well. So it's kind of a balance between two and trying to figure out what you feel like. But I just think there's just gonna be so many scoring opportunities in Chicago that it's gonna increase the output that Hugh Roach will have. And I mean, he was able to finish as the front row 8 last year with only 10 starts and 12 appearances, still scoring 7 tries last season with the Gilgronis. And I think, you could argue that the Chicago Hounds are even better than what the Gilgronis were able to put out last year. Sam Harris is the same coach. You have that connection there as well. So again, I think he's going to be heavily relied upon, especially if this forward pack is something that is put into emphasis by the Chicago Hounds club.
Yeah, I mean, I have Hugh Roach in 4, so I can't disagree with any you say. But when you look at James Malcolm, for me, the one thing that stands out is that he only scored 3 tries, and he's sitting there at 130 fantasy points. You can find guys that can score points that aren't try reliant. They're AKA they don't need the ball in their hand and they can generate fantasy points. That's the type of guy that you want to draft, you want to have on your team. I mean, this guy racked up was 220 plus tackles in the season. He was an absolute machine. He just put his shoulder and his head into everything. So, the fact that he's able to do that, the fact that other people can have the ball and he can still excel and get you points for your team is the reason why I put him over. The other thing, Rye, is that you look at Hugh Roach, you look at last year, you bring up the point of 10 starts, right? What has changed? They've brought in Mason. The Chicago Hounds have brought in Mason Koch, right? It's the same pairing in terms of the hooker position. What makes you think that Hugh Roach is going to get more starts, right? Like that's the unknown for me. And it's still the same coach. We talked about the upsides are on the same coach, but the downsides are on the same coaches.
Sure.
What changes can you expect in terms of what means that he's going to get more starts than he did last year?
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely, pulling threads here. But again, the thing for me is that, Seattle Seawolves coming in, they just have seemed like a lot of guys that are at that hooker position, bringing in now Peter Malcolm.
They got the Malcolm Bros.
They got the Malcolm Bros, which
they're not related.
It will be interesting whether or not how they utilize that. Alex Glover is coming in as well. So again, for me, it was just the idea that there's a lot of competition there. There's going to be competition as well with Hugh Roach. But again, you see that in all the teams, right? You'd expect at least for him to be on the pitch for more games. We're seeing the same thing with Dylan Fawcett. They have that pairing too. There's not many Dean Mears. That's why Dean Mears is at the top of the list. But to my point though, and to what you're saying about those tackles, man, 229 tackles, dude,
ridiculous.
highest among all the front rowers in the entire league. So and that's something you're gonna kind of see as a theme as we go through these top 5s as well. Is that I think especially if we're able to introduce this tackle stat into our league, I think the reliance and the consistency of tackles will be reliable points, right? It's going to be hard to depend on Hugh Roach to kind of be my own devil's advocate to score every single match, but we know that James Malcolm is going to be out there making tackles. So
and the other thing, I think we didn't really touch on this. We talked about Dean Muir getting that amount of points with 22 turnovers. Malcolm, 0 turnovers on the season last year. I don't know if that's how accurate that is. I mean, the stats are pretty accurate that we got, but 0 turnovers, that's pretty unreal. The one thing I do want to, before we move on from our 3 and 4, because we just swapped these around really. Before we move on, we saw flashes last year of Hugh Roach getting that ball in the wing and looking athletic,
Yep.
athletic. Like, he does not look like a hooker in the wing. He looks like he's right at home. And that's just another reason why, we can vouch for Hugh Roach and Hugh Roach and really expect some electricity out of that man.
Same, and then we mentioned same coach. We're gonna expect him for that emphasis for him to be right back out there on that wing. And who doesn't love to see a big man out on the outside, making an attempt of burning some of their back three opponents, on that wing. So it'll be interesting to see. And then to round out, you mentioned obviously we just switched up James Malcolm and Hugh Roach in those 3-4 spots. Me having Hugh Roach at 3, you having James Malcolm at 3, and then vice versa for the 4 spot. But this is where it gets interesting in that 5 spot. So you're going with the new guy. I kind of stayed safe here and went with a friend of the show, Andrew Quattrin, as part of the New England Free Jacks seeing a new team. For me, at least, we saw what Quattrin was able to do last season with the Toronto Arrows, and who's to say that he's not able to do that with the New England Free Jacks? And you can argue that, the Free Jacks have shown that they are an explosive team, and they're going to put guys in position to get points, especially from a fantasy perspective. So Andrew Quattrin finishing as that front row, that 5th best front row, 121.6 fantasy points with the Arrows. I think the Arrow only, no pun intended, the arrow only points
you
up.
intended it.
The arrow only points up with him now being a part of the New England Free Jacks.
Hey, and to add on to that point, Ryan, something that I just thought of is that he did that with the electric Jack McRogers there.
Also
right?
a friend of the show.
Yeah, also a friend of the show. They both shared time, and Quattrin was still able to put up really great points, really great numbers. He's going to have that same issue here with the New England Free Jacks. That hooker room looks full, right? Santa Rivi. They just signed Carreru Symes from I believe Hawke's Bay, right? And they have Foster Dewitt, another Canadian. So that hooker room does look full. But we've seen him in the past being able to excel, even with shared time, even with splitting halves. That shouldn't be an issue for Quattrin.
But why don't you tell me a little bit about Henry Bell and what we can expect with him as part of Utah? Because obviously we don't have any fantasy stats for him because this is going to be his first season in the MLR. But Matt's got big things expected for Henry Bell at that 5th spot.
Hey, the minute I saw Henry Bell sign for Utah, Brian, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember in my head at least saying, this guy's going to be fantasy relevant. This guy's going to be a stud. I look more into him. I look into him as I'm doing research. This guy plays 10 matches for Otago. By the way, the NBC Bunnings Cup seasons is really only 10 round robin, regular season games, regular season weeks. He scores 4 tries, right? We're looking at some of the guys that we have on our list. 3 tries is something that we really enjoy. 10 tries is something that we're seeing as a stud. This guy does it in 10 games, 4 tries. You can expect 5, 6, maybe 7 tries out of him. Coming out of Otago, I think that when you do that in that league, you should expect to have more success in this league. And we've seen guys come in and have that success. And you got to find those guys and see where those guys are before anybody else catches on. That's why I got my top 5. The other thing, the big thing that I want to point out is the fact that Utah's hooker room is just, I don't see a competition really for him. I see Vugakoto, right? He's in there in the room. I can see him spending time, but to me, it looks like Henry Bell has a stranglehold of this starting spot. And hey, Utah could prove me wrong, sure. But I think that he's going to be the guy throughout the season, be that guy for the Utah Warriors. We know that they really rely on their forward pack, and we're going to see that kind of grow, continue the season. He's going to be a big part of it.
And I know Vandy, as a Utah Warriors fan, loves to hear that as well.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm sure he'll have Henry Bell marked on his draft sheet because it's always fun to have your own team guys on your own fantasy team as well.
Yeah.
So for any of our
he could try and take him from me, but he's on my top 5. So
there we go. And then something interesting to note before we move over to our top 5 second rowers for the 2023 year, all 5 guys that we chose for both of our top 5s are hookers. And there's a big reason for that, because those are the guys that are going to be involved from a scoring perspective. Not anything against the tight head props and the loose head props, but just hookers from a fantasy perspective are just so much more involved in scoring opportunities. It just gives them that edge in terms of, what you want ideally in that front row position. So tip to our league
Yeah.
members. I think you'll be looking to fill
I
those
mean,
spots at that hooker
yeah,
position.
it was.
You'll want to fill that spot. I think the advantage of having a hooker at that front row spot is going to be massive when you go up into a matchup with a team that may not have a hooker at that spot.
Yeah, I mean, we looked at the top 5 and just quick. I mean, top 15 scorers from last season using these stats, and like we're seeing back like reserve hookers number 16 on the 23-day match squad.
Yep.
Right, scoring higher than some of the starting props. So
Yeah.
I think it just is what it is. I think we can expect that trend to continue throughout the league. Our league members are smart, right? They know this stuff.
That's sure, and it's only gotten smarter too with the addition of James Deal, MLR stats, and the rugby wrap up crew, Zach Lanning, Matt McCarthy as well. So definitely some mind games that people will have to be playing moving forward when it comes to some of these guys and when it comes to draft day, which we'll talk about towards the end of the show here. But hey, let's move on now to our 2023 top fantasy second rowers, and again, we got a top 5. I got a top 5. You got a top 5 as well. Again, a lot of similarities here, kind of similar with that front row position. You do have a new name on the list again as well. So let's break it down. In my top 5, I got Johan Mumsen of Rugby Atlanta, Stan South at the 2 position with Old Glory DC, Josh Larson of the New England Free Jacks at the 3 spot, Yuri Van Vuren for Utah at the 4 spot, and Ben Mitchell now with the Seattle Seawolves, was with, I believe, the San Diego Legion last season.
Love that man.
He rounds out my top 5 for me. Matt, what about your top 5?
Yeah. So, I mean, we match the same Johan Mumsen, Stan South, and we switch it up at 3 and 4 again. You know, I've got Ben Mitchell there, Yuri Van Vuren, and then guys, the new man on the squad, the new Nola Gold, flanker coming out of Manawatu, Liam Hallam Heems.
There you go.
And we'll get more to that too, and why I chose him, and who's gonna take a shot at him? I am. So
there we go. You can't be giving away your draft board too much, man. It seems like
you don't know. They don't know. What if they don't trust me?
There you go.
It's called reverse psychology here, right?
Well, let's break it down again. Johan Mumsen, both of our number 1 second rowers heading into this year, and I should mention too about the second row position, especially with the stats that we had last season. Second rowers, not that we intended this in any way.
Ryan.
Yeah, they were not good. They were not really fantasy relevant. You were just kind of picking guys to get into the roster just to fill some points, and you were kind of praying that maybe he found himself into the try zone at some point, which would give you a huge edge on that season. But now with the shift of new fantasy stats that we are trying to introduce, becoming a little bit more relevant, but still, I think from the grand scheme of fantasy points wise, they're still on the lower end when it's compared to position, front rowers even, definitely under back rowers, those positions are going to still score more points, but these guys are still now going to make a difference in your fantasy line because they are going to be scoring points, and a guy that's going to be a huge advantage at that position. And the reason why I kind of mention all of that is Johan Mumsen, and you had him on your fantasy squad last year, was kind of that one guy that is the outlier where he is at that second row position, but he's still putting up points like a hooker or like a back rower.
I mean, I think I did end up dropping him at some point, but that's how my season went last year, for anybody who doesn't know. But this is another guy, just like Dean Muir, where we looked at that second row position and Johan Mumsen was the clear favorite. Like he was the clear guy that we kind of just said, this guy goes number 1. Here it is, right? Like, I don't think there's much else that needs to be said. He was just an absolute stud on that Rattle team, or I don't even know what to call them anymore. He was an absolute stud, and he was a guy that you could expect to get 80 minutes out of him. And again, 80 minutes, opportunities. He's going to get tackles, going to have opportunity for try. He was just a workhorse out there.
And I think the thing that kind of sets him apart is one that kind of him being out there, and you talk about availability, he's going to be out there in scoring opportunities. But the real big thing though that we're noticing here that he kind of sets himself from other second rows is his explosiveness and his tendency to kind of break for those big plays. I mean, this is a guy that totaled a total of 724 meters gained throughout the entirety of the 2022 season. And you're comparing that to guys in our top 5 even that were at most able to get around 550 meters. So to rack up 200 meters more over the course of a season is a huge advantage at that second row position. And that's why he finished last year as the second row one. And that's why we expect this this year for him to once again
Yeah.
finish at that second row, at that top second row position again. And again, being part of an explosive Rugby Atlanta unit is going to only pay dividends for that as well. So let's move closely now to the second guy that we got. Both of us at that number 2 position. Stan South finished last year as the second row too. Had a total of 134.2 fantasy points compared to Johan Mumsen's 150.7. For me, and I'll start here before you hop in, Matt. Is he's kind of a guy that has an act of doing a couple things really, really well. And I think that lends itself to being very, very fantasy relevant. Two things that really stood out to me was the amount of tackling that he does as a second rower, and also the breakdown steals. This is a guy that racked up 6 total breakdown steals in the 2022 season, 200 total tackles last year as well. And I think when you can bring that from the second row position, we talk about the consistency of tackles. This is a guy that's going to consistently be able to get you points. And he may not have explosive games like Johan Mumsen and be able to break out for those big meters in those matches, but nonetheless, he's going to at least provide you with a consistent number of points throughout the entirety of the year, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, look, the guy's getting like 12 tackles a game, right? Like he's tackling, he's getting breakdown steals. You don't need the tries when guys are consistently doing that. You don't need to expect the tries every game. And we talked about this with James Malcolm, and I'll keep it short because you already really touched on it, is that the guy doesn't need the ball to have an opportunity to score your team points.
Sure.
Right.
And that's big. That's going to be huge heading into this next season.
You don't need to, we found ourselves last year just hoping that the guy that we have on our team would get the ball, have a line break. You don't need to do that. You watch the guy on defense. You can watch the guy on offense, but on defense is where he's going to shine for you. And he doesn't even need the ball. He's going to be there. He's going to be at the breakdown. He's going to be making the tackles. It's a more relaxing way to watch and a more relaxing way to enjoy a guy on your team.
Yeah, exactly. And to kind of put a bow on it, this is also interesting that he only started and appeared in 12 matches last season. So there is room for growth in expanding that fantasy output, and that's compared to 3 extra matches that Johan Mumsen were able to play in. And there's quite a possibility that you can bridge that 16-point gap between him and Johan Mumsen if he was able to appear in a few more matches, but nonetheless comes in hot at that number 2 spot. And then again, the 3 spot is where it starts to differ. And I have Josh Larson of the New England Free Jacks scoring 118.3 fantasy points last season, finishing as the 5th best second rower overall. You have Ben Mitchell now with the Seattle Seawolves. I'm interested to hear your take on how big of an impact it was of him moving from San Diego to Seattle in him boosting up into your rankings. But for me with Josh Larson, I'll keep it simple. We talked about it multiple times here. We just talked about Stan South. The guy's a tackle machine, man. And if he can consistently get you points, when I'm looking at that second row position, I'm really looking for consistent points. And when a guy is able to rack you up 232 total tackles throughout the season, that is something that's going to come in on a week in and week out basis. That was the 5th most tackles for a player in the entire MLR at that second row position, tied with his former teammate Slade McDowell, who's not returning with the New England Free Jacks this season. But he was the highest tackler when it came to the second row position. That's what I want. Consistent points. 232, mark it down, 3rd best.
Oh, and he's El Capitan, Ryan. We can't forget that. As maybe how minute that seems, you want to keep your Capitan on the field for most of the game. And again, it's more opportunity to get more points. You can trust that he'll be on for 70, 80 minutes, most weekends. And he's in a room that honestly doesn't have that deep of a roster at the moment. New England Free Jacks, I think, only have 3 locks signed.
It'll be more.
There will be more, of course. But Josh Larson right now is a clear standout number 1 lock. There's 2 of them, obviously, in the engine room in the scrum. But he's the clear cut lead lock for them right now, which is also good to see. Now, Ben Mitchell. Look, this guy's just my boy. This guy was absolutely my boy last year. I think I raved about him on the show. I loved watching him play. The one thing that I just love to see, and honestly is only going to grow with the fact that Seattle is looking so electric with their signings and with the way that their team looks, is that he always found the ability to have the ball in his hand. No matter where the ruck was, he found a way to find work, find the ball, and he was scoring tries and finding opportunities to get close to the line. You know, all you needed was that just extra push. That's all you needed. And I think going from that San Diego Legion team, who wasn't that great last year, I think we've definitely seen better San Diego Legion side, to the Seattle Seawolves, who's, you know, we think it made it to a final last year. Whatever the circumstances, we know that their team is a different team this year. They've gotten even better, even after making it to the final. And I think he's really, again, just like Josh Larson, the clear-cut number one lock on that team, and a guy who we can expect big games out of every weekend.
And for me, the difference between Josh Larson and Ben Mitchell really is the try scoring ability that you mentioned that Ben Mitchell has. That kind of Josh Larson maybe lacks a little bit. Not that he's not good enough to have that ability, but just, you know, with the way that the game plan flows, it's just, and you know, Ben Mitchell's act for looking for space and doing that, and the system that he's playing a part of, allowing him to move to those spaces. That's the one thing that worries me with me putting Josh Larson at my 3 and having Ben Mitchell a little bit lower, but again, it's all the way you're looking at, right? When you're building your roster, right? Do you want an explosive guy at your second row position? Maybe then you're looking for more of a guy like Ben Mitchell or Johan Mumson, or do you want consistency and you're learning more towards guys like Stan South and Josh Larson? Really, it's about roster makeup, and you know, if you have an explosive guy, you know, at your hooker position, maybe you want more consistent points coming out of your second row position. So it really is a context thing.
Ben Mitchell is not going to be the guy you're looking for to make, you know, crazy amount of tackles like Stan South or Josh Larson, right? He's a guy that you're going to see as, I'm going to get some great games out of him, and I'm going to get some real average games out of him. But you're looking for those great games, and you're hoping for those great games, and those are going to win you big in big weeks.
Yeah, that will be the difference. And just to put it into perspective, Josh Larson had 60. Let me do the math here. 65 more tackles than Ben Mitchell had in that 2022 season. So we'll see whether or not that difference really pays off in my rankings or in your rankings moving forward. And then a guy that we need to move on to the 4th position that we both have, Yuri Van Buren. Utah Warriors, 130.9 fantasy points last season, finishing as the 3rd best second rower in our fantasy league. You know, I think the big thing here, and the reason why I had to drop him down a little bit from that 3 spot, is that the guy was able to rack up 9 breakdown steals. And I in my eyes, that has to regress a little bit towards the mean, right? There's no way that racking up 9 breakdowns, almost averaging, you know, basically, you know, almost every game outside, you know, like around 66% of the games, I should say. You're basically guaranteeing yourself a breakdown steal. And breakdown steals do have a higher value in our league because they're so important when it comes to the actual game plan. We thought that we needed to reward people. So I'm just worried that for Yuri Van Buren, a big part of his production last season were those breakdown steals. And I do predict that may regress a little bit moving forward.
Well, actually, I'm going the other way with that, because I think that the breakdown steals are just going to continue, because look, he's got eligibility for second row. Yes. But if we remember last season, he was playing a lot of that last season at the number 8 position.
Sure.
So you're looking at that back row position. The opportunities to get breakdown steals at that back row position is much higher than the second, when you're in the second row. So just the way it happens, the way that you're you're expected to play as a number 8, I think he's going to continue to find those opportunities, continue to get those breakdown steals. And that's really why I have him here at the number 4. I mean, maybe different here, but kind of the same, you know? Right?
Yeah. And I think that, you know, from just a dependability standpoint, I much rather depend on tackles being made and racked up during a match, because there's just so much more frequent tackle opportunities than maybe breakdown steal opportunities.
Yeah, fair.
But then again, to your point as well, you know, if he's able to get that back row eligibility while maintaining that second row eligibility, that is a huge standpoint. And maybe for listeners or viewers that maybe are newer to rugby and are learning the sport as Vandy has been and it continues to do, there is an emphasis, like you man, about the roles that you're playing. These are not just because the second row position not getting breakdown steals, and not because they don't have the ability to do that. It's just what those positions are asked to do, Matt, like you mentioned, and the back row position is in more opportunities to get those breakdown steals, is why we may see an increased value when it comes to Yuri Van Vuren. Let's move on to the fifth spot. We already explained Ben Mitchell, kind of the same idea for me, just a new team. I had him slot at that fifth spot, but for you, again, a new face of the MLR hitting in your fifth spot.
Hey, look, I told everybody that the more people that were coming in from the NPC Bunnings Cup, the better I was going to get. And I'm telling you guys that these calls that I'm making are not just coming out of nowhere, right? Liam Hallam-Eames, this guy is a stud, all right? He played for Manawatu. He played 9 matches out of the 10, right? He played for them, and he is coming in, having experience playing with the Crusaders, I believe. He is an absolute stud. Still young, not a guy that's coming in from, after his career, after his prime. He's coming in hot. The one reason, though, that I put him at number 5 is looking at that Nola Gold engine room, as I've been calling it, at that second row position. You got Cam Dolan, yes, but, Liam Hallam-Eames is, to me, the clear number 1 lock. The clear number 1 lock on the team. The guy who's going to play, maybe doesn't get subbed out 80% of the time. Plays at 70, 80 minutes. I think he's just going to be such a huge addition to the Nola Gold team, who, by the way, I've been calling to win the cup or win the shield this year. Just a huge addition. I think he's going to score some big points, have a really big year. And yeah, that's really why I threw him in at number 5. We always have one new guy, Ryan, in every position that comes in and just steals the show. It's going to be him.
It's funny that you mentioned the Nola Gold, you mentioned Cam Dolan, because he was a guy that was just so pivotal for the Nola Gold last season.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see that dynamic of how Liam Hallam-Eames kind of fits into that role, because Cam Dolan was just so explosive. I mean, I believe last season Cam Dolan played a majority of his matches at the number 8 position, but the fact that he's listed at that lock position will be interesting to see, and how that changes his role moving forward, because I do think that Cam Dolan last season was a very effective, I believe, fantasy player, finishing last season 119.5 total fantasy points, finishing in the top 75. So definitely very fantasy relevant. We'll see how that changes as he shifts more over to the lock role, and how Liam Hallam-Eames changes that kind of position.
Or he doesn't switch over, and Hallam-Eames again is the clear cut number 1 lock.
It's funny though, but they have him listed on their release, the roster. One of the teams that we do appreciate who released their roster, they do have him listed down as a lock. So we'll see how that all plays out again. And there's still a lot to learn, and obviously that will have an impact on these rankings. But hey, I love hearing it that some new faces are going to break down these top 5. All right,
to the big boys, right?
On to the big boys. And we know, and those who have been following around our Fantasy Ruckers League and Fantasy MLR as a whole, a lot of points to be had when it comes to that back row position. Lots of scoring opportunities. And I think in addition to that, when we break down these rankings for us, myself, and for Matt, this is, I think, where we differ the most. I know it's been pretty even keel here with these past 2 positions, with front row and second row. Just a couple minor changes with the rankings and a couple new faces, but it's a little bit different here in the back row positions, as I reveal the graphic for our viewers, and we'll list it out here for our listeners as well. But hey, some interesting changes here for my top 5 back rowers of 2023. I'm going with Reichert Hadding at that number 1 spot. I know we're gonna get into that, and why there's a little bit of controversy involved with that. Lance Williams at my number 2 spot for Utah. Devin Short for the Nola Gold at that 3 spot. Hanko Germicius, I repeat. I know our in-house Houston SaberCats fan, Stephen Lowen, who's a part of the Fantasy Ruckers League, will like to hear me slotting him up there. I'm boosting him quite a bit to get him in my 4 spot. And then number 5, Ronan Foley of the now Seattle Seawolves, last year playing for the Toronto Arrows. Matt, why don't you give me your top 5?
So I got Lance Williams 1, Devin Short 2, Reichert Hadding 3, Brendan O'Connor, I got him at 4 of Rugby New York, somebody that you don't have on your list.
Nope.
And then again, I swear I'm not putting these guys at 5 just because I'm throwing them in there. But I got Mitch Jacobson, a new guy.
I do like that name in there.
Coming into the New England Free Jacks. We'll get more to him, but another NPC Bunnings Cup guy. I told you guys are all finished now that there's so many of them in the league. I told you.
All right. Well, let's start breaking these down because it's going to take a little bit here because it looks like at every single position we do
Yeah.
have a difference here. And it starts with the number 1 spot. Reichert Hadding, I have at that number 1 spot back rower for the 2023 year. It's hard to question it. Obviously, there's some
Ryan, it's
controversy
easy.
involved. It's some controversy involved heading into the season with him being booked for the PED use, getting banned for, I believe it was 6 months towards the tail end of last year. But the timing wise, it works out that he is still eligible to be with the team at the start of this 2023 year. So from a fantasy production standpoint, I don't think that you will have to be missing out at any point in time in terms of missing games with regards to a suspension of any sort.
You know what?
So with that in mind, for me to do that, I had to put him in. I mean, when you score 219.9 fantasy points, and that is what 30 more points than the next back rower in Lance Williams, I got to give you the benefit of the doubt.
How much of that was due to roids, Ryan?
I know, but
How
you're still gonna be in those opportunities to score. Again, I am worried about a try regression, not so much more about the steroids having any impact on that. But when you're scoring 10 total tries last season, I do feel like those opportunities may regress a little bit. But nonetheless, when you put up 219.9 fantasy points, you can afford to lose a little bit of tries there,
Right.
because you're not only tackling in the 200 plus numbers in Reichert Hadding, you're also racking up over 1,000 meters as well.
You're
on top
missing
of that,
the
just
science,
an overall
Ryan.
player.
You're missing the science, Ryan. Ryan, the anti-doping agency said once you get off the steroids, every stat regresses at least 35 to 42%. Okay, this was right out of the papers. Read the papers. Read the papers, everybody. All right, look it up. I'll send the links. I'll send the sources. I'll send the receipts.
We want to see that in the Discord
Okay?
community.
35 to 42% regression, all the stats. All right. That means what? We're going to see only around 600, 700 meters gained. We're going to see around 6 tries. That's all average stuff, Ryan. That's number three. That's number 3 stuff. Also, don't you think the Seattle Seawolves are maybe thinking that might happen by bringing on Ronan Foley? Don't you think that in their heads are thinking, hey, what's going to happen to Reichert Hadding off the roids when we've got Ronan Foley at number 5? Or, you got Ronan Foley in there, bringing him into the roster.
Yes, and believe me, it was and we'll get to it when we get to Ronan Foley,
that.
But that was a point of contention here. Does worry me that Ronan Foley is now in the mix, a guy that was just so explosive and so huge for that Toronto Arrows squad last season at that number 8 position. It's going to be interesting how they kind of play that out. Will Reichert Hadding remain at the number 8 spot? I'm counting so, because he was just so good and he's been part of the squad all season long. I feel like it doesn't hurt to add better players, at least from a team standpoint. From a fantasy standpoint, it's a different story, but I do think they'll stick with their guy in Reichert Hadding and give him the benefit of the doubt moving forward. But yeah, I mean, you have Lance Williams at number 1. I had him at number 2. Explain to me why you had him at number 1. For me, really, at the end of the day, I felt that Lance Williams has the same thing to offer as Reichert Hadding. I kind of view him as a poor man's Reichert Hadding.
Wow. You mean a clean Reichert Hadding?
Okay. All right. Tell me why you got Lance Williams.
Well, look, this is a little bit of combination of stats and watching him last year. I think we talked about him a lot last year in terms of just the way that this guy carries the ball and the way that he is, breaking off the back of scrums, making gain line. It just seems like it's so easy for him. Mm-hmm. I think this is a guy that is just going to continue to trend up. He really found his form last year. He's just going to continue to trend up. Whatever he did last year, he's going to do a little bit better. 170 plus tackles, maybe around, not as many meters gained. He's got 842, not close to the 1,000, but look, remember, he's clean, right? So I think he's going to continue to trend up. Let's look for 900 plus meters gained, a few more tries. I'd say 7 tries this year. I think he's going to look good. I think he's going to be the number 1 back row once we finish off the end of the season.
And that's, again, 189.6 fantasy points last season, finishing as the 2nd best back row last season. Easily could make that jump. I mean, you look at the turnovers that he was able to accumulate last season, 29 total turnovers. And we talked about how if, you eliminate a couple of those, a handful of those, he's right back up there in the conversation with the top back rows.
Yeah, but then you look at the breakdown steals. Right? Like you look at 11 breakdown steals, you're looking at that plus a lethal ball carrier. He's not a guy that is just doing things without the ball. Without the ball, he's getting breakdown steals. With the ball, He's breaking tackles, making gain line, getting meters gained. Something that you love to see out of a back row.
All right, let's move to that 2 position. No more needs to be said about Lance Williams that I
Yeah.
have at number 2. Again, I just think that he basically has the same thing to offer as Reichert Hadding, just at maybe a little bit of a diminished level, a little bit. But
Clean
again,
level.
we'll see how that all plays out. But you got Devin Short at your 2 spot. I have him at my 3 spot.
Yeah.
Explain to me what made you put Devin Short kind of up at that tier, and especially, I guess, as a whole, why he's above Reichert Hadding.
Yeah. So, look, I think when you look at Devin Short and you look at his ability and his athleticism to carry the ball and what he can do with ball in hand, 900 meters gained, 2 turnovers. You're looking at, even with the meters gained, and we talked about this with Lance Williams, right? Both sides of the ball. Without the ball, instead of breakdown steals, he's making tackles, close to 200 tackles, almost matching Reichert Hadding. 900 meters gained, almost matching Reichert Hadding again. Is missing some of the tries, or a lot of the tries there. But I think that that's something that, you can see grow, especially with the NOLA Gold team getting better this year.
Mm-hmm.
You can definitely see that growing with them. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why, and again, like, I do expect Reichert Hadding to have some sort of regression this year. I don't expect him to keep that same level that he had last year for obvious reasons and some less obvious reasons. And Devin Short, I think, is just going to continue to kind of move and progress with the team around him.
And I would say the thing that worries me most about Devin Short is, for me, it's who is going to play that number 8 position for NOLA. Last year we had Cam Dolan playing most of that time. Is he? I know NOLA has him listed as a lock this season, but is it still Cam Dolan? Is it, when Cam Dolan wasn't playing number 8, it was Mani Tagowiha that was stepping in at that number 8 position.
Nice
so
try.
and it wasn't it wasn't Devin Short. These names are gonna kill me, and we still got a whole season left to go. But nonetheless,
Ryan, his brother's on the team. You got to get this one right now.
yeah, I got to practice real hard in the mirror. But nonetheless, again, I do think there's a chance that, is it just, who is playing those positions for NOLA Gold, essentially? Can we see Mani Tagowiha step in that role and maybe replicate what the Devin Short production is? That's what concerns me. And that's why I had to kind of mitigate my risk and put him at that 3 spot, because I'm just not certain about who is playing where with that NOLA Gold team. It could be intertwined there. So it'll be interesting. Again, you had Reichert Hadding at that 3 spot. I had Devin Short at that spot. So moving on to the 4 spot, and I think this is where it gets very, very interesting. I got Hanko Gramicius there, and people
Ryan, I love it.
People might be questioning why I have that guy in that spot. You have Brendan O'Connor. I'll let you go first and explain Brendan O'Connor, because originally when I was building this top 5, I did have Brendan O'Connor in there as well, but I had to find a way to get Hanko in there. So explain to me what you're looking forward to with Brendan O'Connor at your 4 spot.
Look, there's one word, and it's just tackles.
Mm-hmm.
The guy is a workhorse. The guy is a machine. You're racking up 238 tackles. That is the highest, I believe, in all of back row. And maybe outside of Mike Smith, possibly, but Mike Smith isn't coming back this year because he's busy, being a doctor.
Out of all the back rowers that will be returning this season, he was the highest.
So yeah, look, you're not looking for offensive production from Brendan O'Connor. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking at 238 tackles, and you're looking to get that consistent points, and he's able to produce. And you can see that with 157 points, he's able to produce with that many tackles. The other thing is that he didn't play all the games. He missed 2 games. So you can think about, how many more tackles he can get if he plays the full season this year. And we're, not just tackles, but also continue to grow in terms of the offensive production. I think we can continue to see that. But yeah, the main thing why I have Brendan O'Connor is the reliability of tackles. And I really love the fact that you can draft someone on your team and have someone who can get 13, 14, 15 tackles a game, because it's an easy points, for that week.
And again, we mentioned it earlier in the show about kind of your roster construction. The guys that you pick here, and the guys, maybe there will be a guy higher on a list that is available when you are drafting, but is it a guy that fits kind of your roster makeup, right? You're not going to win this Fantasy Ruckers Championship jersey that's behind me here by having guys that are all consistent. You're not going to win Fantasy Ruckers championships if you got guys that are only volatile and explosive. You're going to have a nice mix of the two. If you do pick a guy that is very, very explosive at your front row position and at your second row position, maybe you're looking at a guy like like Brendan O'Connor to fill that hole, just because you're ensuring yourself that you're going to be getting points on a weekly basis. So if you do get burned by a Dean Muir, or you do get burned by a Johan Mumson, you do have a guy that's stepping in there at least getting you points on a regular basis. All right, you ready for my Hanko
Ryan, I can't wait, man. I can't wait.
So doing some digging here, I had to go into the weeds, and like I said, I had an initial top 5 ready to go, Matt, and we shared this the other day to make sure that we could do all the prep work and talk about these players. And this was kind of unexpected for you. I literally right before the show told you, hey,
I mean,
notice a little bit of a difference in my top 5.
Ryan, he knocked somebody out last year. I don't know, I'm not surprised. The guy's an animal.
And
But
I'm not
please,
saying that there was that
did.
one match that I can remember vividly of him just trucking guys and running guys over. I'm not saying that had a big part of me putting him in that 4 spot, but it definitely had a little bit of a say here, putting him in this spot. But for me, in 12 appearances last season, a majority of those not happening at that number 8 position, he was able to be solid. As soon as he shifted over to that number 8 position for the LA Giltinis towards the tail end of the season, that's when we really saw the explosiveness of Hanko Gramicius. And now we're seeing him move to a forward pack that has an emphasis of using that pack and using them to score points.
Yep.
And on top of that, him deciding to go there. You know what I mean? Like getting signed by Houston, making that decision to move over there. We're obviously going to see a lot of Hanko. We're going to see him implemented in the game style. I know he only had 113 fantasy points last year, only finishing as the 21st best back rower. But what we saw towards the tail end of the season at that number 8 position with the LA Giltinis, him now being able to provide that over now to the Houston SaberCats, who are now who are missing their number 8, who played at a majority of their season last year. It is going to be super exciting to see him make that jump and have a regular role within that space at that back row position, especially if it's the number 8 position. I'm super excited to see what this guy can provide in fantasy MLR, and I found it hard to not put him in the list despite him being lower in the rankings due to his
my only concern with him is the fact that if you look at that back row depth chart, you see guys like Danny Barrett, you see like guys like Naso Keke, you see Gideon Van Vyk or Gideon Van Vick or Gideon Van Wick, John Wick, I don't know. But, you see those guys and you kind of think that's a lot of back rows to have to fit into a lot of guys that you can have as a coach have confidence in. That was the only thing. But at the end of the day, Ryan, you're right. It's Hanko Gramicius. The guy brings juice. And that's all he brings.
And to kind of put things into perspective of what kind of mitigated that for me and kind of gave me the cojones to put Hanko Gramicius in that 4 spot is because, one, again, they made the roster move and they want him, right? This is not a guy that was already on the team and now trying to, bring guys in to kind of replace that production. He's one of the new signings for Houston. He's coming in to be implemented in the game style. There was a reason why he wanted to go to Houston, and that's what they're doing moving forward. And then on top of that, the guy playing the majority of the number 8 position for Houston last year, Jacko Bezewin. Oh man, this is gonna be a hard one. Jacko Bezewin Denhout.
Oh, you almost got it. There we go.
He played all but 3 matches at that number 8 position. And you mentioned those other guys on that list who may have filled in at that number 8 role. No, it wasn't any of those guys that you mentioned. It was Malone Al-Jabori who slotted in at that number 8 position. So when I do the math, there's one guy that can slot in at that number 8 position for the entirety of the year.
Ryan, you sure you're not drafting? You sure you're not drafting?
I wish
that sounds like you're drafting in a couple weeks.
I wish I could be drafting, man. I really, really do. But hey, I just gave a pretty solid nugget to someone who's going to be super happy with having Hanko Gramicius at that back row position.
That's true, but you know who you won't be drafting is Mitch Jacobson.
I won't be drafting Mitch Jacobson. Now, before you get into that, because this is a guy that I was trying to slot in a new face into my top 5 ranks, because as you can see, I didn't get any.
You weren't brave enough.
Faces. I wasn't. Well, I feel like I'm kind of brave with the Hanko pick. You gotta give me credit. Come on.
Hanko knocked a dude out last year. I'm not surprised.
All right. Well, for me, at the number 5 spot, I mentioned I have Ronan Foley there, and this is the game that I'm playing within myself in terms of trying to figure out what the heck is going to go on between Reichert Hadding and Ronan Foley. Essentially, Seattle was somehow able to bring in two of the best number 8s in the entire league and fit them on one squad. Is it going to be Reichert Hadding at the number 8? Is it going to be Ronan Foley at the number 8? Honestly, I could probably interchange the two and put Ronan Foley at number 1 and Reichert Hadding at number 5 if I knew that Ronan Foley is going to start at the number 8 position. So for me, I had to put him in there just because of how effective he was last season with the Toronto Arrows. I think that production is going to get lessened if he does end up playing, let's say, at the flanker role, which is why I have him at the number 5, but he's still Ronan Foley. He's still the same explosive player, racking him, like I said, 187.7 fantasy points, finishing as the 3rd best back rower. Hard to not include in my top 5, and I just had to over Mitch Jacobson. But you tell me why I missed out on Mitch Jacobson, because as a Waikato Chiefs fan, man, I was trying to figure out a way to get Mitch Jacobson in here, but I just couldn't find the
quick thing on Ronan Foley. I think, you can kind of look at last season and really see how he excelled at the when he got put in that 8 position. I think that's where he really turned it on, where we really saw the Ronan Foley in form. But we'll see. He had similar situation last year with Lucas Rumble as well. Lucas Rumble is a guy that is a staple to every team that he goes on. And Reichert Hadding is kind of the same. So you can definitely, it's not crazy to put him in your top 5. That's for sure.
I mean to say as well is that he moves to a team that you could argue has a higher emphasis on the pack, right? The Seattle
Seahawks better, honestly.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so we knew that, I know at least giving me the confidence to put in the top 5 there, it would have been a different story if he was part of a different team and competing for that position. But the fact that Seattle has such an emphasis on that front pack really gave me the comfortability to at least get him in that top 5. But yeah, tell me more about Mitch Jacobson.
All right, Mitch Jacobson. All right. So another guy to the NPC Bunnings Cup, right? The reason why Mitch Jacobson is in here is the explosive, not just on defense. We talked about Devin Short, Lance Williams having the ability to have an effect both with the ball and off the ball. Mitch Jacobson, same kind of deal, right? He averaged, I think, 12 and a half tackles a game in 8 games for Waikato, right? That's 8 games, right? He got 100 tackles in that game, in that span of time. You're looking at 200 plus tackles in this league. With 16 games played, you already had that kind of explosiveness coming from him. He's an explosive player. We'll be able to break the line. We'll be able to not just, get tries, have meters gained, but also get try assists. I think that he is somebody that you can definitely it's worth taking a calculated risk on. Somebody that, I might take a calculated risk on, but he's definitely in my top 5. I just see him as somebody who's going to take a real, make a real impact on and off the on offense and on defense as well.
That's what hard off the field.
He's gonna be great off the field too. I promise you that.
He'll be a great locker room guy. Great locker room guy.
But also, look at the back rows. I think they have a staple 3 that you look at the New England Free Jacks, right? You got William Conradi, you got Joe Johnson, you got Mitch Jacobson. I think those 3 are the staple. You look at the rest, it's kind of, hey, like, you're not too sure. So I think that really helps in his favor as well. Not too much competition at that back row position for him. And yeah, it's just another guy to throw a bone to, take a risk on, and he's gonna light it up. I already know it.
And then as we jump into kind of our top 5 forwards overall heading into the 2023 season, which there's going to be a clear cut theme when we reveal that right here. But I'm so looking forward to this whole these no name guys that haven't made I shouldn't say no name guys. The guys that haven't made an appearance yet in the MLR season either pay off big for you or absolutely backfire and just not work. But I guess we'll see.
I might look back on this and remember why I was last place last year.
You got to risk it for the biscuit, and you're definitely doing that here. But all right, let's reveal here our top 5 forwards heading into the 2023 season. And as you can notice, when you're looking at the graphic, if you're watching on YouTube, and we'll let you know here for our listeners, is that there's an emphasis on the back row position. The back row position just get put into opportunities that are relevant to fantasy, that are going to score points, that are going to really make a difference when it comes to your fantasy MLR league. So basically our top 4s are exactly duplicate of what our back row rankings are. I got Reichert Hadding at 1, Lance Williams at 2, number 3 Devin Short, number 4 Hanko Gramicius, which I love is in there, and it's kind of interesting, which we'll allude to, is that there is a Houston prominence that is in my forward position. But hey, if there's
This
a
is
team
true.
that there's a team that you're gonna hedge your bet on, it's gonna be the Houston SaberCats when it comes to forwards. And then for you, 1 Lance Williams, 2 Devin Short, 3 Reichert Hadding, 4 Brendan O'Connor. And it's funny because I think after you pass that kind of 4th position in the back row, that's when you start to hit players that, at least on a fantasy production standpoint, are now becoming a little bit more relatable to the other positions, right?
Yeah.
I think Reichert Hadding, Lance Williams, Devin Short, and in your case, Brendan O'Connor, in my case, Hanko Green. Even you can even argue that 4 spot, I think, is where you start to see a similarity between second rowers and front rowers, which is why in our 5 spots, we've introduced a different position here, and it's not just all back row players. For me, I put Dean Muir there, which is the second Houston SaberCats player in there. I just think being a part of that pod, having those scoring opportunities, the guy that was just so heavily, used more than any other front rower out there. You mentioned earlier in the show about him, not being subbed off, racking up those 70 plus minutes, racking up those 80 plus minutes. The advantage of having that at the front row position is just so big. That's why Dean Muir kind of slotted in that number 5. But for you went the other route and went with the second rower.
Yeah, I mean, Johan Mumson for me, it was the fact that he's essentially a back rower that is in the second row. No, he doesn't necessarily play in the back row or have that eligibility, but you look at the meters gained, 700 plus meters gained, still getting 170 plus tackles. He's a guy that is still a presence with the ball in hand. And like you said, is able to make those electric plays, able to break the line, able to make those big runs. And I just think it's helpful when you can have that possibility in the second rower position, one that really isn't, really doesn't score them in points. But Johan Mumson has shown that he's able to put up those back row like numbers and be in that top 5 forwards.
And I think that's what is a good point there, is that I think when you go with Johan Mumson, you're less reliant, I guess, from a team perspective. Johan Mumson can create for himself. He can get those explosive plays. He can break out for those big tries. Dean Muir, if this Houston pod backfires on me, I think Dean Muir is going to be a lot more reliant on how the pack kind of performs as a whole, really taking advantage of those lineouts within the 10-meter area, within the 22. I think that's going to be a little bit more reliant, but nonetheless, it's not a coincidence that both the guys that we chose were kind of the outliers within their positions, and gave them merit to kind of join those other back rowers, because they have the potential to hit those fantasy point totals, at least as a above average back rower heading into the 2023 year.
For sure. And look, I mean, we've talked about these guys already, so I'm going to finish it off with this, right? Look, I love talking forwards. I love talking stats. I love it all. But next week, Ryan, we're getting into our bread and butter.
Yep, next
our
week.
bread and butter. I am not big enough to talk about these guys accurately, all right? I am not big enough, but I am big enough to talk about these other guys accurately. Maybe not centers, but it's our bread and butter, Ryan. This is where we shine.
We are backs at heart, both being scrum halves in our playing days. But yes, that will be coming next episode. We will be breaking down our top 5 backs at each position. That includes scrum half, fly half, center, and then a back 3, and then we'll have an overall kind of backs top 5 as well thrown in there too, which will be interesting to see kind of who breaks that, and the same discussion that we've had here in terms of working out those compositions and working out how the difference between a front rower and a back rower and a second rower. We'll learn the differences between all those different back positions and what they provide to the fantasy world. But man, this was a lot of fun, dude. This breaking down these top 5s, dude. I love that we were able to kind of get one, especially in that back rowers one, that really had a big difference and introduce them.
I hope the league members take one thing out of this, is that I'm putting in work. I'm putting in work. All right. So watch out. You see my top 5s. You should see the sticky notes I had to put in to get that top 5. I'm putting in work, guys. So, be scared. The newcomers too, especially the newcomers, be scared.
There you go, Matt calling out the entire Fantasy Ruckers League. Hey, yeah, we'll definitely continue to break down these top 5s. And again, we're going to continue to punch out rankings, especially draft prep rankings, to make sure that our league members are fully informed when we do have that draft. And speaking of deciding when this draft is, I do have a Commissioner Hees update for this episode.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear
Hear ye, hear ye. Here is Commissioner Yee with a Fantasy Ruckers League update. For all of our league members out there, we're fine-tuning kind of the last little bits here as we open up the Fantasy MLR season for the official Fantasy Ruckers League. For our new viewers and new listeners, I have a jersey behind me. We've alluded to it all episode long, the Fantasy Ruckers Championship jersey. If you win our Fantasy Ruckers League, you get your name etched in Fantasy MLR history, get your name on this jersey, and also make a little bit of charitable contributions on the way, which we'll talk more about in the coming episodes. But nonetheless, I do have a little bit of an update for our league members when it comes to that draft that we have been alluding to all episode long. We are still finalizing that draft date. We have released the dates on our Discord community, on our Discord channel, in the league channel for our Fantasy Ruckers League members. They are in the process right now of figuring out which dates are going to work, but we are looking at, I believe it is the week, let me make sure that I get this correct here. We are looking at the week of February 13th, I believe, or building up to February 13th, the February 8th to 13th days. We're going to finalize that date, get that out there. I know some of our league members have been asking. It is going to be a live streamed draft. So we're going to at least try to get down at least a first few rounds into that live stream and have a little fun with it. Figure out and have live reaction of who chooses what. You'll get to see Matthew kind of get all up in arms when people start stealing the guys that he's suggesting to people. But we are slowly getting to that point where we are finalizing the draft date. Next episode, we will have an official draft date set for all of our viewers and listeners so that they will be able to tune in. So make sure you look out for that. And yeah, going to be super exciting stuff. Drafting is one of the best parts about fantasy sports in general. It's something that I think has been lacking in other kind of attempts at fantasy rugby in other leagues. There's just not that draft idea and owning your own team. And that's something that the Fantasy Ruckers are providing with this system that we are introducing to the MLR. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun, man. And last year's draft was super fun with the guys that were able to pick the guys that they wanted. And we mentioned it. Vandy mentioned it last episode in our interview with Andrew Coe about how he literally texted me, I'm going to pick Andrew Coe this pick, and he got sniped right before him. And just seeing the reaction of all that is super fun. And it's just a fun event to kind of get everyone together, the entire league together, and just have a little fun on a night in a different way when it comes to the MLR.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. It's I think like a week after the first week of preseason games. So yeah, we'll get a little chance to see a little taste of some players that, do some scouting, do some film room, be able to look at some of the guys just before. But yeah, I'm counting down the days, the weeks to be able to draft better than everybody else.
Man, it's big words for a guy that finished towards the tail.
Don't bring it up. Let's go. Wrap it up.
Yeah, all right. And just lastly here, we do have some pretty exciting news in addition to that draft date, hopefully coming out in the next coming episode. So all of our listeners, viewers, supporters of the Fantasy Ruckers Show, new or old, make sure you're following along because it's going to be super exciting stuff. And again, we are continuing to work towards trying to get everyone that we can who wants to play Fantasy MLR involved. Again, we can't make any promises that will happen this season, but we are in the works of doing that, and eventually that will be a thing. That will become a reality. That is our promise to you guys. And make sure you're staying in tune. Make sure you're following us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers, because we'll make the announcement there. Our Discord community members, that's where you can really find out and be involved with our show. And those guys will definitely know first. So make sure you're staying in tune with that and the exciting news that hopefully will be coming in the coming weeks as well. But that does it, Matt. That's episode number 50, man. Incredible, man. Here's to another 50 more. Again, I got to throw the applause out there. I think it's awesome that we've been able to last 50 episodes here and keep this project going. Again, a round of applause also goes out to our viewers and listeners, because without our listeners and without our viewers and without the supporters and all the kind words that we get for making an effort into doing Fantasy MLR, it's been a really, really fun experience. I mean, I can honestly say, I don't think I would have been able to get through those nights of hand calculating those numbers last season in our inaugural year if it wasn't for a lot of the viewers and supporters just, talking about how much they love fantasy MLR and hope that one day it comes to them, which again, we're continuing to try hard. But thank you again to all our viewers. Thank you again to all of our listeners and supporters of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. We love you, and we hope that we can provide you 50 episodes more of great fantasy MLR content.
Hey, you said it all. Let's wrap it up, because that's a great way to finish the 50th episode.
All right. For Matt Yee, Devin, we miss you, man. Super excited for the stuff to come. Again, to all of our listeners and viewers, that is not the end of your heel from him. He will be back around. He is still trying to become the best rugby fan that he can become. And also, you heard it in his message to you guys that he's hunting down for that Fantasy Ruckers Championship, along with Utah, hopefully getting a championship for him too. We'll see whether or not. But nonetheless, for Matt, for Ryan, we'll be back. We'll be back next week with our top 5 backs. You won't want to miss it. We'll see you then.
Be back, Bandy.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.